Welcome back to the deep dive. We are clearing the decks today. Usually we're jumping around between a few different articles, maybe some trending topics, but today requires a different approach.
It really does.
We have a stack of papers here that is, honestly, it is heavy. And I don't just mean physically heavy, though there is a mountain of source material to get through. I mean emotionally, culturally heavy.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about a seismic event in the literary world, something that, really changes the landscape for a lot of people.
We are talking about a figure who has cast a shadow, usually a benevolent, whimsical, magical shadow over the world of fantasy and literature for the better part of 3 decades.
For sure.
We are talking about Neil Gaiman.
A titan. Truly, I don't think you can overstate his influence.
And before we get into the darkness of today's topic, and it does get dark, I think we have to set the stage. Because for our listeners who might just know the name but not the feeling, it's important.
Nick.
You think of Sandman, right? You think of American Gods, Coraline, Good Omens. For a certain generation, actually for several generations, he wasn't just an author, he was. He was like the cool goth uncle of literature.
That is the perfect description. I've heard that one before, and it's so true. He was the guy who made it okay to be weird, to be dreamy, to love myths and monsters and all the stuff that was, maybe not mainstream.
Exactly. And he had this whole persona.
Oh, absolutely. He cultivated this very specific persona. The messy hair, the all-black wardrobe, the gentle storytelling voice. He felt accessible. He felt like he was on your side.
That's the key word, accessible. He wasn't like those reclusive authors hiding on a mountain somewhere. He was constantly on social media, Twitter, Tumblr, now Blue Sky.
He was everywhere.
Answering fans about writing advice, reblogging fan art, championing social justice causes. He felt safe. He felt like one of the good ones.
Which is exactly why the last year and a half has been so incredibly jarring for his fan base. Because that voice, that constant reassuring hum of Neil Gaiman on the internet, it just stopped.
Cold turkey.
On. It was a sudden, total blackout.
18 months of radio silence. No tweets about his bees or his garden. No answers to writing prompts. No Instagram photos of his library.
And, for a little while, I think people might have thought, oh, he's just busy writing. He's in the zone. But we know now that wasn't the case.
Not at all.
No. That silence wasn't a creative retreat. It was a bunker. It was a direct response to a series of devastating allegations that came out via the Tortoise podcast, an investigative outfit in the UK.
And that's why we're talking about this today, because the silence has finally broken. Neil Gaiman has resurfaced.
And oh boy, has he resurfaced.
Yeah. He didn't just post a "hello, I'm back" selfie. He posted a statement claiming total innocence. But it is not a simple denial. It is... well, it's a lie.
It's a real tangled web.
It involves a bizarre web of defenses, a specific endorsement of a fringe Substack project called Technopathology.
Which sounds like a cyberpunk villain, by the way.
It really does. It involves conspiracy theories about YouTubers and a massive backlash from the very communities that used to worship.
It is an incredibly chaotic situation. And to help us navigate it, we're looking at a deep dive analysis by sci-fi writer and commentator John Del Aro. He's been tracking this story. He calls it real fantasy news.
Yeah.
And he breaks down not just the legal side, but the cultural fault.
Yeah, his perspective is interesting because it really tries to cut through the PR spin and just look at the raw data on the table.
Which is what we need to do.
So our mission today is to verify what is actually happening. We need to walk through the timeline of these allegations because I think a lot of people miss the details in the chaos. We need to analyze Gaiman's specific defense strategy, examine this innocent project he is endorsing, and look at how the world is reacting.
And we're going to do this without taking side. We're just going to look at the evidence provided in our sources and try to make sense of the mess.
And it is a mess.
Yeah.
So let's start with the context, the silence.
Okay.
Right. So let's rewind 1.5. Gaiman goes dark. Right.
Because the Tortoise podcast released an expose. And this wasn't a tabloid rumor. This wasn't a blind item on some gossip site. This was a multi-part investigation detailing allegations from 7 different women.
7. That's a significant number. It's hard to dismiss 7 people as a coincidence or a misunderstanding.
Precisely. And the source material from John Del Aro's breaks these down. And it's important to understand the variety here. It's not just one type of accusation. It ranges from, inappropriate boundaries to alleged blackmail to whole spectrum of misconduct.
Let's start with the first one that our source material really dives. The nanny.
This is, I think, a classic example of a power imbalance. We have a young woman. The source note, she was the age of Gaiman's granddaughter at the time.
Wow.
Who was employed as a nanny or babysitter for his child.
Okay, let's just stop there for a second. Granddaughter's age. That already sets off so many alarm bells regarding the dynamic. We aren't talking about 2 peers meeting at a coffee shop.
Not even close. It is a domestic employment situation.
Yeah.
He is the boss. She's the employee. He is the global literary legend. She is the
There's a
heroine.
massive power differential right from the jump.
Huge. And the allegation is that Gaiman engaged in physical intimacy with her. Now, this is the interesting part. Gaiman actually responded to this one initially, way back when the story first broke. He admitted to cuddling in a bathtub with her.
I'm sorry, he admitted to what?
Cuddling in a bath. Those are the words.
Cuddling in a bathtub. Trying to wrap my head around that. You are the employer. You are a world-famous author in your 60s. She is your employee, the age of your granddaughter, and you are cuddling in a bathtub.
Gaiman's defense at the time was that it was innocent. He framed it as a non-sexual, comforting thing. Perhaps he was trying to frame it as, paternal, like a fatherly gesture.
That does not track.
At all. The accuser, on the other hand, felt it was predatory. She felt groomed. And this is where that whole good guy persona starts to crack. Because even if you take his version, it was just cuddling. That is still a massive professional and ethical violation.
It's wildly inappropriate. I mean, you think about it in any other context. If a CEO of a company was cuddling in a bathtub with a 20-year-old intern, they would be fired immediately. There would be no debate.
None.
It doesn't matter if it was innocent in his head. The power dynamic makes it toxic by default.
Exactly. But it gets dark. From there, we move to the housing allegation. This one, when I was reading the source material, this one really shook me.
This is the one that sounds like something out of a dark thriller novel, honestly.
It really does. So this involves a woman with 3 daughters who was living in Gaiman's New York estate. She was a tenant, effectively. The claim is that her housing, the roof over her children's heads, was made conditional on her performing sexual acts for Gaiman.
That is the literal definition of coercion. Do this or you lose your home. Do this or your kids are on this. There's no gray area there.
Correct. The source describes it as blackmail, plain and simple. And there's a financial element here, too, which is critical. The source mentions hush money involving several hundred thousand.
Several hundred thousand. That is a lot of money to pay someone to happen. That is not, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding money.
Not at all. And it involved a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA. Now, here is the legal nuance the source brings up, and it is absolutely crucial. NDAs are common in business, right? If you work for Apple, you sign an NDA so you don't leak the new iPhone. That's standard.
Sure, that makes sense.
But in cases of alleged abuse or illegal acts like trading sex for housing, sexual coercion, an NDA is very often legally unenforceable.
Right. Because you cannot write a contract that says, I am allowed to commit a crime against you and you are not allowed to tell them. That contract is void from the start.
Exactly. You cannot contract someone into silence regarding a crime. However, the big however, most people don't know that. Or, more importantly, they don't have the money to hire a lawyer to tell them that.
Of course.
So the intimidation factor is huge. If you sign a piece of paper that says, I will sue you for $1 million if you talk, and you are a single mom with 3 kids, you stay quiet. You don't take that.
It acts as a muzzle. It buys time. It buys silence. It allows the reputation to stay clean while the victim lives in fear of a lawsuit they can't afford.
Precisely. It's a weapon. And there were other women, too.
What about the others? You said that the initial report was 7 women.
There was a former massage therapist for Gaiman's ex-wife, Amanda Palmer. She alleged that during a session, Gaiman flashed her and implied he wanted intimate relations.
So again, abusing a professional context. You are there to do a job, a therapeutic job, and the client makes it sexual.
It's that same blurring of lines again. That pattern of, I'm famous, I'm powerful, so the normal rules of professional conduct don't apply.
And there was a report from Reddit mentioned in the source.
Yes. Regarding a so-called party incident.
Right.
A woman who believes she was drugged at a party at his house. And then, more generally, there are these overarching claims of manipulative, abusive relationships and grooming behavior. The source notes that one victim mentioned there were up to 14 women known to Amanda Palmer who had similar stories.
14. So the 7 might just be the ones who went public or spoke to the investigators. That is a staggering pattern. This isn't an isolated he said, she said situation. This is a deluge.
It suggests a systemic behavior, a modus operandi that went on for years.
But I want to touch on the legal side of things because there was a specific case that got dismissed, right? The Scarlett Pavage case. And I think this is where people get confused about the legal side of things versus the moral side.
This is a critical point that the source emphasized. Scarlett Pavage filed a civil lawsuit against Gaiman. That lawsuit was dismissed. Now, in the court of public opinion, when we hear dismissed, we think, okay, he's innocent, the court cleared him, it's over.
Right. The immediate reaction is, the judge threw it out, so it must be fake.
That is the common assumption. But the source explains that the dismissal was purely on jurisdictional grounds. It had nothing to do with the evidence.
What does that mean exactly?
The alleged events involved a woman from New Zealand, and the case was filed in the U.S. The court essentially said, we don't have the authority to judge this case here. You are in the wrong bill.
So they didn't even look at the evidence. They didn't read the texts or interview witnesses.
None of it. They didn't look at a single piece of evidence related to the actual accusations. They just said, wrong venue. It's a technicality. It is absolutely not an exoneration.
But Gaiman can use it as a shield, right? He can just say the case was thrown out.
Of course. And that's what people do. For a PR defense, a dismissal is a dismissal. You can wave that piece of paper and say, see, the court agreed with me, even if the court never actually looked at whether you did it or not.
So that brings us to the present day. After 18 months of silence, after the Tortoise podcast, after the technical dismissal of that one civil suit, Gaiman returns.
The return of the king, or so he hoped.
He comes back to social media, he logs back in, and he posts a statement. Now, I want to analyze this statement because the language is fascinating. It's a masterclass in crisis management, or maybe a disaster class, depending on your perspective.
I'd lean toward the latter.
He starts by thanking people for their kind messages.
Which is an interesting choice, because according to our source, John Del Arroz, the support is actually very scarce. He's been tracking the online sentiment.
Yeah, JDA points out that it seems like everyone is condemning him, so who is he thanking? It feels like he's thanking an imaginary crowd.
It's a rhetorical tactic. It's called social proof. You create the illusion of a support network. You start by saying, thank you to the millions who love me, even if the room is empty. It tries to signal to the reader, see, other people are on my side, you should be too.
It frames the narrative immediately. I am the beloved victim here being supported by my true fans.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he goes for the big denial. He says, quote, the allegations against me are completely and simply untrue.
No ambiguity there. He isn't saying, I remember it differently. He isn't saying it was consensual but messy. He is saying false, untrue, didn't happen.
And he claims he has proof. This is the part that gets me. He says there are emails, text messages, and video evidence that flatly contradict the accusers.
Which raises the obvious question, the question that screams at you when you read. If you have video evidence that proves you are innocent, why did you hide for a year and a half?
Exactly. Why let your reputation burn to the ground? Why let your TV shows get canceled?
If I am accused of a heinous crime, and I have a video on my phone that proves I was somewhere else, or that the interaction was totally different from what was described, I am posting that video on day one.
You'd be shouting it from the rooftop.
I would not be waiting 18 months and then vaguely alluding to it in a statement with the comments turned off.
It implies that the evidence might not be as flatly contradictory as he claimed, or that it requires a lot of context that maybe isn't flattering.
It suggests something is off. And then, of course, he blames the media. He calls the reporting an echo chamber interested in clicks and outrage.
Clicks and outrage. That's the classic defense of someone in hot water. The media just wants money. They're just biased. They're out to get me.
It is. It's a deflection tactic. If the news is bad, attack the messenger. He claims the journalist ignored his mountains of evidence. But here is where the source, John Del Arroz, plays a really damning card.
The audio clip.
Yes. So Gaiman claims he has evidence of his innocence, but JDA points to an audio recording that has been circulating online for a while.
Oh, this clip. This is the one that gave me chills when I first heard about it.
In this audio, you can allegedly hear Gaiman speaking to one of the accusers. And he isn't saying, I didn't do it. He isn't saying, you are lying.
No, not at all. He is allegedly offering her money.
Specifically, $15,000 a year for the next 4 years.
$15,000 a year for 4 years. That is incredibly specific. That's a payment plan. That's not a settlement. That's an allowance.
It's structured, and during the conversation, he refers to her as my dear.
Dear. It's so paternalistic and condescending in that context. It's that kindly old storyteller voice being used allegedly to buy silence. It makes my skin crawl.
It creates a massive friction with his written statement. You can't publicly say, I have evidence these women are liars, while there's a recording of you allegedly saying, here is $60,000 to please not talk about this.
It completely undermines the whole I'm innocent narrative. If you are innocent, you don't pay hush money. You fight. You don't put someone on a payroll to stay quiet.
Exactly. And speaking of fighting, Gaiman tries to pivot to his career in the statement. He talks about what he's been doing during his silence. He says he was making television.
But wait, didn't his shows get canceled? Or at least put on indefinite?
Yes, the source points this out very clearly. Good Armin, his flagship show with Amazon, was paused or effectively ended after its last season. The adaptation of Anansi Boys faced huge issues and delay. Studios were distancing themselves.
So when Gaiman says, I was making television, he is projecting a reality that doesn't quite exist anymore.
He wasn't really making television. Television was unmaking him. The industry had already put him in the penalty box.
He also mentions being a full-time dad and calling it the best part of his life.
Which again again is a classic deflection.
It's the family man defense. Look at me, I'm just a wholesome dad. It's designed to make you feel sympathy for him, to make you feel bad for attacking him. How can you attack this man who is just raising his child?
But it rings incredibly hollow when the allegations involve nannies and young women in his domestic space. It brings the focus right back to the home environment where some of the alleged abuse happened. It's a very risky pivot.
It really is. But okay, we have to talk about the weirdest part of this comeback. This is where it goes from a typical celebrity scandal to something else entirely. The technopathology project.
This is truly the strangest element of the story. It shifts from standard celebrity defense 101 to deep internet conspiracy.
So in his statement, Gaiman specifically names the Substack writer technopathology and says he has no contact with this person, but praises their meticulous fact and evidence.
He essentially outsources his own defense. He says, if you want the truth, go read this blog. They've done the work.
So naturally, we and our source, JDA, went to look at the blog, and it is not what you would expect from a legal defense.
No, it's not a legal brief. It's not a calm presentation of facts. Well, the source calls it an attack dog, and that's pretty accurate.
It is deeply aggressive. It features what is essentially an enemies list. It categorizes reporters, critics, and even other authors into these bizarre inflammatory groups with names like the TERF Nazi Alliance.
The TERF Nazi Alliance.
Yeah.
I mean, just stop and think about that phrase. Those are just buzzwords thrown into a blender. TERF, which stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist, and Nazi. Those are two groups that historically hate each other.
It makes no logical sense. It's just designed to be as poisonous as possible.
It's extremely inflammatory language.
Yeah.
And look at who is on this list. You have John Del Arroz, our source, labeled as an embittered right-wing comics pariah.
Which, to be fair, JDA seems to find kind of funny.
He does. He sort of wears it as a badge of honor. But then you have Vox Day, labeled a right-wing nationalist misogynist. You have J.K. Rowling, labeled a TERF who needs no introduction.
And it's not just individuals, right?
No, you have mainstream media outlets like the Catholic Herald and Tortoise, the very podcast that broke this story.
It's a scattershot approach. It's just anyone. He's lumping a right-wing sci-fi author, a famous feminist author, a Catholic newspaper, and a British investigative podcast into one giant, shadowy conspiracy.
It attempts to paint anyone who reported on the allegations as part of a single coordinated hit job. The Substack even has this wild conspiracy theory about the timing of the news.
The tip-off theory? This part is amazing.
Right. So the Substack claims that John Del Arroz released a YouTube video about the allegations on the very same day the Tortoise podcast dropped its investigation. And they argue this proves JDA was tipped off by some shadowy agency or was secretly working with Gaiman's enemies.
And what does JDA say to that? What's his explanation?
He laughs at it. He says, basically, I don't edit my videos. I just react quickly because I want to sell. He's very open about his motivation. He's like, I'm a YouTuber. Breaking news happens. I turn on the camera. I want to get views. Plug my book, Space Fleet Academy.
He's just a guy reacting to the news cycle like every other content creator on the...
Exactly. He says something like, I am not James Bond. I am a guy trying to sell sci-fi. The idea that he's in league with a British investigative firm is laughable to him.
It's Occam's razor, right?
Right.
What's more likely, a global conspiracy involving rival authors in international newspapers, or a YouTuber seeing a headline and hitting record?
Clearly the latter. But the Substack goes even further down the rabbit hole. It tries to connect Gaiman to Joss Whedon.
Joss Whedon, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer guy. What's the connection?
Well, Whedon also faced a wave of allegations of abusive behavior on his set. The Technopathology blog tries to correlate the timing of articles about Gaiman and articles about Whedon, suggesting a coordinated media hit job against prominent male feminists in Hollywood.
So the argument is they are coming for the male feminists. It's a witch hunt against the good guys.
That's the narrative it's trying to build, which leads us directly into the political paradox of this whole situation. Because Neil Gaiman built his entire modern brand on being the good guy.
He was the ultimate ally.
Yeah.
The perfect male feminist.
He was vocal about #Haforsh. He tweeted things like, I believe Survivor. He called on men to listen to women and fight for them. He was constantly signaling his virtue.
Please clap, as our source John Del Arroz says, summarizing that ad.
Indeed. And that history makes the sense of betrayal felt by his fan base so much sharper.
It's the hypocrisy, right? It's one thing if a known villain does something bad, you're not surprised. It's another thing entirely when the guy who told you for years to believe women is suddenly allegedly paying women to be quiet and calling them liars.
It's a profound cognitive dissonance, and this technopathology defense makes it so much worse. By endorsing a site that uses terms like TERF Nazi Alliance or attacks critics critics with what can only be described as anti-woke style rhetoric, Gaiman is actively alienating the very progressive community he used to court.
He's burning his own base.
Completely. And critics are calling it the human shield argument.
I've seen that term. What does it mean in this context?
Yes. The idea is that he is using his past support for trans rights or his generally progressive politics as a shield. The subtext is, you can't attack me, I'm an ally. If you attack me, you're helping the bad guys, the transphobes, the Nazis.
But it's not working at all.
No. And the source points this out beautifully. You have John Del Arroz, who is openly right-wing, who admits to being an embittered pariah, condemning Gaiman. And then you look at the people on Blue Sky or Twitter users with Free Palestine and trans rights flags in their bios, and they are condemning Gaiman with even more fury.
It's the horseshoe theory in action. The far left and the far right have finally found common ground. They both think Neil Gaiman's behavior is unacceptable.
When you have lost the people who hate your politics and the people who share your politics, you're on a very lonely island. Del Arroz makes the point. This isn't about politics anymore. It's about the behavior.
The behavior is the unifying factor. So let's look at the immediate fallout. Gaiman is back. He's posted his statement. How is the internet handling it?
It's a total lockdown on his end. He disabled comments on his posts on X and Blue Sky.
Which is basically admitting, I know you all hate this, and I don't want to hear it.
It signals that he isn't interested in a dialogue. He wants to broadcast his innocence without having to hear a single word of rebuttal. But the conversation is happening anyway, just not on his page, especially on Blue Sky.
Blue Sky is interesting because a lot of people move there specifically to get away from the toxicity of X-Twitter. It's supposed to be a more curated, safer space.
And the reaction there has been fierce. Users are circulating what they call unfollow protocol. They are teaching each other how to nuke block Gaiman.
Nuke block. That sounds serious. What is that?
It's an aggressive blocking strategy. It means blocking him and anyone who follows him or boosts his defense. It's a way of completely scrubbing his influence and his supporters from your timeline. The sentiment is visceral.
What are people saying?
Well, the source pulls some quotes. One user called him a scumbag. Another made a comparison to Terry Pratchett.
Oh, don't bring that. Just breaks my heart.
It's a very common comparison because they were such close friends and collaborators on Good Omens. The comment suggested that if Pratchett were alive, he would be like his character Granny Weatherwax, the ultimate moral compass, and that he would be horrified by Gaiman's action.
Wow.
It really highlights how far Gaiman has fallen from that pedestal of the beloved fantasy grandpa. He's being contrasted with his own best friend's leg.
And what about the media? You mentioned they were hesitant at first?
Yes. The source mentions that outlets like Comics Beat, which might have been friendly or at least neutral before, are now turning away. Initially, there was some hesitation. Del Arroz calls them shills for being slow to report on the initial allegations.
But that's changed now.
It has to. Even the shills can't ignore the sheer volume of allegations and, more importantly, the utterly bizarre nature of his defense. The Technopathology Project didn't save him. It might have actually accelerated the backlash because it showed he wasn't taking accountability. He was looking for a conspiracy.
It's almost like a story Gaiman himself would write. A man creates a monster to protect himself, but the monster just ends up scaring everyone away and burning his house.
That is a very apt analogy. The defense has become more damaging than the original silence.
So here we are. The silence is broken, but the noise is louder and more chaotic than ever. We have a literary icon accused of predatory behavior, hiding behind a fringe, conspiracy-laden blog, while citing his past goods as a get-out-of-jail-free card.
It is surreal, and it raises some really big questions that go beyond just this person.
Right. Let's try to distill that. What are the takeaways? Why does this matter beyond just celebrity gossip?
I think it matters because it exposes the fragility of the hero complex in literature. We want our storytellers to be as good and as wise as their story. We want the person who wrote The Sandman, a story about responsibility and change, to be a responsible person who is capable.
And when they aren't, it creates a real crisis for the reader. It hurts.
It does. It also shines a very harsh light on the dangerous reality of NDA. It shows how money and legal intimidation can buy silence and allow patterns of alleged abuse to continue for decades unchecked.
It also says a lot about parasocial relationships.
Oh, absolutely. It touches on the limits of that parasocial trust. We think we know these people because we follow them on Twitter and they seem so nice, but we don't. We only know the persona they've built.
And Gaiman's entire defense seems to rely on this idea that good art can save him. He literally had that famous speech, right? Make good art.
He did. It was his whole brand. And in his comeback statement, he pivots right back to that. He says, I went back to writing. He is betting that if he writes a good enough book, we will all forgive and forget the rest.
That is the provocative thought I want to leave ever. Gaiman seems to believe that the artist can be separated from the man, and that if the artist performs well enough, the man is. But in this era, where we are more connected and frankly more critical than ever, can a perfect story ever redeem and imperfect.
Or does the technopathology of his defense, the conspiracy theories, the lashing out, the refusal to engage with any criticism, prove that the storyteller has actually lost the plot entirely?
That is a question for you to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this very deep dive. It was a heavy one, but an important one.
Indeed. Keep reading, keep thinking, and always question the narrative.
We'll see you next time.